in the series, The Life That We Long For. And we've been talking about this in this series. We've just been examining the needs and the desires of our lives and holding them up against Jesus Christ's words, that he came that we would have life and have it to the full. And so each week we're finding out that it is our attachment to Jesus. It is our love for God because he first loved us, that as we learn to love him with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourselves, that we begin to discover that abundant life that Jesus came to give us. And we've been looking at different needs and longings that we have, a longing for a name, for unity, for family, for intimacy, to name a few. And today we're going to look at something that a lot of not just college students, but I think probably all of us in this room can relate to, is a longing for rest. A longing for rest. And our primary text this morning comes out of Matthew chapter 11, where Jesus says the following words: "Come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." The other day I was at home on my laptop, and I took a deep sigh, as I often do, and I made the comment that it was going to be a really late night. And my daughter Natalie was sitting there. She's like, "Well, what are you working on, Mom?" And I said, "Oh, I'm working on my sermon about rest." And she, like you, laughed at me. She was like, "Okay, or maybe you should just go to bed." Good call, good call. Does anybody out there need a nap? Anybody at all? Yes, of course you do. You're busy people. You are busy people in a fast-paced world, and it is demanding and insatiable, and there are things to do. Am I right? There are things to get done. And by contrast, the Gospel of Matthew reveals to us that the heart of Jesus, the one place where Jesus describes his own heart in his own words, is gentle and humble. It's not insatiable and demanding like the world that we find ourselves in. It is gentle and humble, which is surprising and appealing, isn't it? It's intriguing. What is this gentle and humble heart? It's more than a nap, more than even a vacation, although both would be really great. We are really longing for a rest that is soul deep, right? Sometimes we try to change our circumstances and arrange our lives in a way so that we can find and experience rest. Or we even look for that in our finances. You know, have I earned enough? Have I saved enough? I can rest when I have this amount in my bank account, or I can rest when I finally get this project done, or when this deadline is over, then I can rest and I can relax. And so we start to look for rest in our circumstances and in our situations, even in our relationships with people. We are looking for rest. We're looking for deep soul rest. And if it seems elusive, because let's be honest, it is, then maybe it's because we're looking in the wrong places. See, the trouble is that we're looking for an external solution for an internal problem. There's something going on within our souls that is not at rest. And so stuff out here can't solve that problem for us. And what Jesus is offering is rest for our souls. Dallas Willard says that the soul is the deepest and the most fundamental level of a life. It's like an inner stream, which gives strength, like an inner stream of water, giving direction and strength and vibrancy to our lives, harmony to every element of our lives. And when that stream, our soul, is as it should be, then it is sourced by the vastness of God and his kingdom, living water. And our whole selves are enlivened and directed by that stream. Soul rest incorporates mind, body, spirit rest, and it's not ultimately dependent on an outside reality because our source is not our bank account. Our source is not what we can do or what we can achieve or accomplish. Our source is not what other people think of us or how we're getting things done or checking off another list of the never-ending to-dos of life. But our source is Jesus Christ. Soul rest is the rest that we need, and it's the rest that we crave, that we long for. It's the grace that's extended to us through Jesus Christ. to sustain us on the journey of life. And maybe even if we know that intellectually, and we have I've followed Jesus for a while, I've been a Christian for a while, and I know that that's the case. Why is it then that we are still we're finding ourselves scrambling and rushing and filled with worry and stress, under pressure to be and to do and to perform? Where is the grace in our lives? As I've been studying the scriptures and examining this heart of Jesus that is gentle and humble, I'm finding that there's a few big things that we all experience in our lives that we need to address if we are going to instead turn our attention off of those things and turn our attention onto Jesus, who gives us that sustaining grace for soul rest. 3 major challenges for our soul. Fear. Right? Fear. There's this fear within us that we have this need for security. Hurry. We're busy people. We're trying to get things done. We're trying to catch up, or we're trying to get ahead. That's a challenge to our rest. And heaviness. That there's just too much to carry in life. The things that I'm concerned about, or the family that I have, or whatever the case may be, there's too much heaviness on my life, too much to carry. And Jesus says, "Come to me and learn from me. Learn from me, and I will give you rest." So that's what we're going to do. We're going to learn today from Jesus how to address these areas in our life that would put a roadblock in front of our rest. Let's start with fear. When we're addressing fear, the answer is not our fear. The answer is, I am secure in Jesus. See, fear comes against our ability to rest for a lot of reasons. We've got internal stuff going on, insecurities. Have I worked enough? Have I saved enough? We have this fear that we're not accomplishing enough, and we have this, we instead focused on not just on the provision, but on the fear that it's not enough. And there's external craziness of the world, right? Political strife and violence and just family issues, all kinds of things, that there's just external chaos. And whether that's external circumstances or it's internal chaos, when we experience the storms of life, we fear instead of rest, don't we? And the truth is, I've had to navigate a lot of storms, like many of you in my life, and it seems like they have just been one after the other in the past couple of years. Just storm after storm after storm. And even when the storm itself seems to have passed and be over, inside of me still feels really turbulent and nervous for the next thing to hit. Like, we're all kind of in this, like, okay, what's happening next? Like, and if something feels too good to be true, it probably is. And what's around the horizon? Like, we made it through this storm, but what about the next one? And instead of resting and relaxing in the quietness of the actual moment, we're afraid of what's next. So how did Jesus do storms? Matthew 8 tells this great story of Jesus in the storm with his disciples. It says this: when Jesus got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A windstorm suddenly arose on the sea, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but Jesus was asleep. Jesus was asleep. And so the disciples went and they woke him up saying, "Lord, save us, we're perishing." I love the Mark account adds, "Don't you care? We are dying. Don't you care?" So Jesus wakes up and he says to them, "Why are you so afraid, you of little faith?" Then he got up, he rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was a dead calm. And they were amazed, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him?" Jesus can sleep through a storm. That's hard to do. That's hard to do. An actual weather storm, yes, that's one thing, but what about the storms of life that we experience? Anybody else have a hard time sleeping when everything in your life feels like you're in a storm? It's hard. It's hard to do. I lie awake because my brain is busy trying to figure out how I'm going to solve this problem, how I'm going to take care of this, because I think that for some reason it's under my control to take care of. And I start dwelling on all the worst case scenarios and putting together a plan of action. This is how I'm going to do this. Okay, if they say this to me, this is how I'm going to respond. And this is like the whirling keeps going, and I'm laying there wide awake, and I cannot rest. But Jesus takes a nap. Psalm 4:8 says, "I will lie down and sleep in peace, for you alone, O Lord, cause me to dwell in safety." Jesus can sleep because he knows who has the authority over the storms. He knows who has the authority. There's another storm in the scriptures, and this time it's just the disciples in the boat. Jesus is not in the boat with them, but all of a sudden things are okay. The weather's not too bad, and they see Jesus walking on the water. And so Peter, who's in the boat, yells out, "Jesus, if that's you, tell me to come out to you." And so he says, "Come." So Peter jumps out of the boat and he starts walking on the water. And can you imagine what was going through his mind at that moment? Like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. I'm really doing this. And he's looking at Jesus. And then it says that when Peter saw the wind, he was afraid. And he began to sink and he cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him and he said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Jesus sleeps through storms. And he walks through the wind. So what are we to do? We're to fix our eyes on Jesus and remember God's faithfulness. We become distracted by the wind, and we move our eyes off of Jesus and instead fix our attention on the threat that is happening in our life. And then suddenly our survival in that storm depends on our own strength instead of the source, the authority. So we need to move our eyes off of the storm, not denying that it's there, not in any way minimizing the reality of what's happening, but fix our eyes on Jesus, who has the authority and bids us come. Every time that the people are experiencing fear, Jesus redirects that fear to a comment about faith. Did you notice that in both of those stories? Jesus says, "You have little faith. Why are you afraid?" There's something that connects the two. Hebrews chapter 11 says that faith is the assurance of things hoped for but not yet received. And what follows after that verse is account after account of people who faced storms and kept their eyes fixed on God, living in obedience because of their faith in him. Not because they were strong enough to do it, but because they knew who had the authority. Remembering the testimonies of those who came before us and the God that they trusted in is powerful, and it's faith-building. Hebrews 12, 1-3, at the end of this section that goes and talks about all these different people who by faith did this and by faith did that, says this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners that you will not grow weary and lose heart." Fix our eyes on Jesus. We find the source of our faith to know that we are secure in him, regardless of what is happening outside of us or within us. We are secure in Jesus. Rest is no longer dependent on calm circumstances in that case. Rest is dependent on who holds us. Next time, like me, when you're looking at the horizon of your life and you're thinking, what, is that a storm? Is that a cloud coming? Is that a cloud coming? Is there another storm about to brew? I love that picture of this great cloud of witnesses. And I want to change my mindset to that. Instead of seeing a storm coming, let's start thinking about what is that great cloud of witnesses, that there is evidence of God's faithfulness that has come before me and has sustained people and will sustain me too, giving me the endurance like he had to keep going. Faith is a stubborn trust in God. It's a stubborn trust that holds on to him and keeps our eyes fixed on him despite our fear. It doesn't mean that we don't feel fear anymore, but despite our fear, we're choosing to be stubborn about our trust in God because he has the authority to bring us through and make us secure. When we address fear, we're remembering that we are secure in Jesus and we can rest. What about hurry? This one's a big one for me. Hurry. You know, maybe I'm not dealing with fear or insecurity in my life. Maybe I'm just too busy to rest. Anyone else too busy? Like there's just too much to do. Can't stop, can't slow down. There are things to be done. And of course, we know what happens when we live our lives in that way. We have exhaustion and we're, just burnt out. I read a journalist called the millennial generation, the burnout generation. Has anybody heard that? The burnout generation. But I gotta say, I'm the tail end of Generation X, and my kids are Generation Z, and I'm pretty sure that millennials actually don't have the monopoly on burnout. I think it's actually kind of universal right now. It's something that we are experiencing. So there's something about the pace of our life that is just draining us. But how did Jesus pace his life? Jesus was not in a hurry. I think the argument can be made that I don't think you see anywhere, at least nothing's coming to mind right now, about any time when Jesus was stressed out and in a hurry. Not once. Matthew 13, there's this great picture. It's just a couple of verses, and I just love this scene. It says, Jesus went out of the house, and he sat by the lake. He's the Son of God on a singular mission to come and bring salvation to this broken, hurting world. And he's got like 3 years of ministry total, and he goes and sits by a lake. Like, to me, if that was my assignment, I'd be like, all right, we got things to do. Where do we go first? Like, let's get this thing done. He's having a lake day. I just think that's funny. Like, I don't know, isn't that like the epitome of relaxation in Oregon? Like every summer, we get a little group text with our friends and we check our calendars and find a Saturday where we're all free and we're like, this is lake day. Like on this day, we are all going to the lake. And you know what we do? We take our chairs, we open them up, and we sit. That's pretty much it. We might get up to get a drink from the cooler or grill a hot dog, maybe jump in the water to cool off for a minute. But essentially, the whole point of the day is to just sit by the lake and relax. And it's great. Jesus is having a lake day. But I love what happens next. It says that the crowds find him. The crowds find him, such large crowds that Jesus' relaxing lake day is no longer possible. Says that the crowds gathered around him and he had to get up. Do the crowds ever find you? Anytime you're just ready, you're like, okay, here's my moment. I can just relax for a few minutes. And then you get ding on your phone and you look, oh shoot, I forgot about that. I have to go pick up so-and-so. Or, oh, an email comes in from work. Or the dog needs to be let out. Or it's one thing after another. It's like the crowds will find you if you are trying to relax. Any moms of young children know exactly what I am talking about. You can't even go to the bathroom. You just can't. Somebody wants you. Somebody needs you. The crowds gathered around him. He got up. He climbed into the boat. And what did he do? He sat in the boat. Jesus just sitting down. Jesus cannot be bothered by these people who are pressuring him to do more, say more, heal more, give more. He can't be bothered by that. He's not in a hurry. He's going to take his time, and it's going to be in his time. He knew his time, and he did not rush it. How many of us know our time? Do we know our time? Do we have a sense of what our lives are about? What matters? What doesn't matter? What needs our immediate attention? What can wait? Do we have a sense of the time that God has given us? Jesus was about the crowds. He was for them. He had compassion on them, but he was not about to let them dictate the speed in which he carried out the mission that God had given him. He was not about to go into panic mode or stress out because someone always needs something from me. No, that wasn't his response. He was not that self-important. He didn't need to be. He knew his time. He was in step with God alone, knowing what God was asking of him, and he set the rhythms of his life accordingly. So he sits down in the boat, and he starts to speak. And now we're thinking, okay, here it comes. Here it comes. Jesus is going to get to the point, tell us what we need. But instead, he starts speaking in parables. This whole thing is just one slow moment after another, right? Parables. Parables are stories that illustrate a truth without just like getting to the point. They don't just tell us what we need. They give us a story that we have to kind of, what was that all about? And you have to think about it and unpack it. Jesus knows his point, but then rather than just outright saying, all right, guys, here's how it's going down. There's 3 things you need to know. Number 1, I'm the Messiah. It's kind of a big deal. Tell people about it. All right? Done. Number 2, I'm gonna die. Don't worry, I'm gonna come back to life. So it's gonna be epic. Make sure your friends are there. That's number 2. Number 3, I'm leaving, but then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna bring you with me, all right? That's how it goes down. Let's go. Go tell your neighbors, let's get this place fixed. Let's put it back in order. Let's go. Break. Ready? No. This is what he says. A farmer went out to sow his seed. What? Get to the point, Jesus. Tell me what I need to know so I can get about the business that you're asking me to do. Give me the steps. Tell me the job. But here's the thing, God is not about transactional information, and he's not about transactional salvation. He's about experiential learning. He's about hospitality and welcome, entering into our spaces to sit and stay a while and rest, to know us and be known by us in deep, relational, lived out everyday kind of a way. And you cannot do that in a hurry. You can't do that in a hurry. You can't fast forward a relationship like that. Kazuki Koyama was a Japanese theologian. He wrote a book in the 70s called 3 Mile an Hour God. I just love the title of that, 3 Hour a Mile God. He was convinced that if that is the speed we walk, 3 miles an hour is the average speed that a human walks, if that's the speed that we walk, then that is the speed of the love of God. That's the speed that the love of God walks. When God wants to teach us something, he's going to take us on a long walk. God's educational process with humans is slow and it's hands-on. And Koyama points to the whole experience of the Israelites, God's people in the wilderness, who wandered for 40 years on a journey that should have taken 11 days, as an example of that. 40 years in the wilderness, he says, points to God's basic educational philosophy. Isn't it a bummer? This might be news to you. Isn't it a bummer, though, that God doesn't say, I want you to learn some things. Go sit in church for 1 hour. You're going to get everything you need to know. Out the door, go on with your life. No, God meets us at work, in the car, at school, wherever we may find ourselves, and is on journey with us. Maybe it's 40 years wandering in the wilderness, teaching us because we have lessons to learn on the way. On the way. It's on the journey with God, being in step with him, that we learn from him. So as Jesus sits in this boat on the lake, speaking to the people in parables that they need to think about and process and discuss and unpack together before arriving at an understanding, he's embodying that same 3 mile an hour pace of his Father. Even the parables reveal the pace. He uses words like seed to describe the kingdom. A seed which takes time underground to germinate and to grow long before any fruit develops, before anything is produced or usable or commodifiable. This is the pace of grace. It's the pace of grace. Grace notices. It needs space to do so. It needs uncluttered and unhurried attention to see the world as you go, to notice fear in someone and comfort it, to notice pain and grieve with it, to notice joy and celebrate it. We'll get there when we get there, Grace says. And I'll walk with you or just sit with you in the meantime. I'll make space for you. Space is the pace of grace. And this is the pace that Jesus invites us into, to stay in step with him and learning to rest as we go. It's slow and it's countercultural and it's just not familiar to us who worship efficiency. Jesus stops to see people, to eat with them, to heal them. He stops and asks a man possessed by demons, "What's your name? What is your name?" There's no hurry to the life of Christ. And that's a word for me. There's no hurry to a life with Christ. So what do? Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." It doesn't say, accomplish something else and know that I am God. Fix this and know that I am God. Be still. Allow what interrupted Jesus to interrupt you. Eugene Peterson says in his message translation of the scriptures we read, it's about learning the unforced rhythms of grace. Unforced rhythms. We walk in step with Jesus. And then lastly, addressing our burdens. There's a lot that we carry. Maybe it's not fear, maybe it's not busyness, maybe it's just the weight of the world is too much. There's just too much on our shoulders. The weight of perfectionism or religion, the weight of just really sad, really hard things. The things we carry can be heavy. What does Jesus mean when he says that my yoke is easy and my burden is light? Well, first, a couple things about yokes. Now, just so you know, I am really grateful to live in an age where I can Google just about anything, and I'm going to get so much information. Back in the day, going to the library, going through the card catalog, half you don't even know what that is, but it's just a time saver. Thanks, Google. There is an article that I found, Harnessing and Implements for Animal Traction. It's really riveting reading, but it describes yokes. It talks about farming equipment. That's what a yoke is. It's this thing that goes over an animal that harness them to either another animal or the plow behind them so that it can pull a load that is more than just a farmer could do on his own. So he talks about the different qualities that make a yoke a good yoke. It has to be strong. That sounds like a given. It has to pull a heavy load, so it's got to be strong, right? It's got to be lightweight because that will reduce the energy waste of the animal. They need to put their energy into pulling the plow, not to having something heavy on them. So it's strong, it's lightweight. It also needs to be flexible so that it doesn't crack or break under pressure. And lastly, and this is my favorite, it has to have soft padding so that it does not irritate the animal's skin. Soft padding. It's non-abrasive. It's comfortable to the animal wearing it. These are the things that describe a good yoke. So when Jesus says, my yoke is easy, that word means kind. My yoke is kind. I have a kind yoke for you to wear that attaches you to me. How did Jesus carry burdens? We like to think he didn't have any, or that he was unbothered by the weight of life because he's God. He knows how it ends, but that's not accurate. As we read in the scriptures, Jesus felt things. He carried heavy things. He was moved with compassion. He was astonished. The prophet Isaiah describes him as a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. And my favorite memory verse as a child, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. In fact, in the Gospels, Jesus, prior to his arrest and crucifixion, admits that he is grieved to the point of death. The Hebrews passage we read earlier explains, however, that it was for the joy set before him that he endured the cross. The joy set before him. He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. There was something that he knew, a future reality with God that he knew that was coming, that gave him the endurance to keep carrying that load. Jesus had an endurance that pointed him towards joy and carried him through the darkest moments of life and even his death. And what did he do in those moments? The scripture tells us that before his arrest and his crucifixion, that he went into the garden to pray. He put his face down to the ground and prayed, crying out, asking God to take this burden away. But God, if you don't, it is your will that is to be done, not my own. When Jesus says, I am gentle and humble in heart, he is saying that is his heart towards us, towards you and me, that he's gentle and he's humble. But I think he's also saying that that's his heart towards God, his Father, that his humility allowed him to lay down whatever potential outcomes were coming, whatever potential outcomes were at stake, regardless of how he felt about them, and entrust them to God. He was able to lay down those burdens. If it is possible, God, take this cup from me, he prayed. Yet not as I will, but as you will. Through his prayer, through his feelings, through being honest about what he was experiencing and what he wanted, he was choosing still God's way, even if it was different, so that he had the strength to get up and say, the hour has come. God never promises that our lives will be trouble-free. He doesn't say that grief will never touch us, but he does offer to share the load so that we don't bear it alone. Take my yoke upon you. My yoke is kind. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Isaiah 61:3 says that he does this for us. He comforts all who mourns. He provides for those who grieve. He bestows a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning. And he trades our spirit of heaviness for a garment of praise. What a good God. That is the kind yoke of Christ, a softer way to carry our burdens, a shared load. We need to trade our yoke, those things that we have put on us that are weighing us down, and give them over to the Lord. God, not as I will, but as you will. We take it to God in prayer, lay down the outcomes, and look ahead to the joy that is before us. When we address the fears in our life and the hurry of our life and the burdens of our life, would we fix our eyes on Jesus? Would we cry out in prayer to God? And would we learn and continually come to Jesus over and over and relearn his way of walking through life? There are different seasons, different realities that we are all in and that we face. Sometimes we have very busy seasons, and that's part of that. Sometimes that's how it should be. Sometimes we can't just quit everything and say, okay, God, he told me to slow down, so I'm just clearing the schedule. Sometimes we can't do that. But there's something about the way that Jesus meets us in our needs that gives us the sustaining strength to keep going in ways that he has asked us to and in the timing that he has asked us to. I'm going to invite the band back up, and we're going to do a few things this morning. We're going to pray together, and then we're going to have a moment of just response. Jesus' invitation to us is to come to him. And this morning, maybe if it's meaningful for you, we have communion down here at the front, and there's some in the back as well. And we also have a prayer team that will be standing in the back. And if it's meaningful for you to actually make a physical movement of coming to Jesus, that might be a way of just taking a step forward and saying, God, yeah, I don't know how to carry the load that I have. And I am too busy. I am just all about my schedule, and I'm not taking the time to really know God. Or whatever the case may be, if there's something that you want to respond to the Lord in this time, this is your time to do that. This is your time to come to Jesus and make that exchange of your burdens for his. And find your soul rest in God alone, who has the care and the authority over your life. Let's stand and pray. Lord, as the psalmist said, my soul finds rest in God alone. You are strong and you are loving. Find rest, my soul. Find rest, my soul, in God alone. Lord, you are the one who brings rest to our souls. It's not in our circumstances or our finances or our activity or our performance. It's not in having an easy life. That's not where we find rest. We find rest in who you are. So God, this morning, would you train our eyes to be fixed on who you are? Would you teach us your way over and over again as we continually come to you, Lord, and say, God, I want to walk in your steps. I need some help shouldering this load. God, I'm afraid. There's things in my life that are scary right now. Give us faith, God. Let us experience the space that grace has provided to us so that we can rest regardless of our circumstances and the realities that are around us, Lord. Thank you that it is because of you that we dwell in safety. You are good. You are God. And this morning, we say yes to you, Jesus. Amen.